All right, well, welcome everyone. So I'm going to be talking about a little tool that I wrote about 3 years ago, apparently, or at least it started off around about 3 years ago, called Chauffeur, and it started as a bit of an experiment, and I'll kind of talk through how I got to where it is now, and then mostly it's going to be a bit of a demo of how this works. And also because I only wrote the slides at about 4:30 today, so I've got a lot of preparation in terms of slide-based content. That's why we'll just jump straight into demos as quickly as we can.
Nice title slide. Yeah.
Oh yeah, this is like totally my design theme, and I thought I'd keep it on brand with the new color scheme. That's why I went with the purple. I was going to go with an orange scheme, but that's just totally off brand now. I've been doing Umbraco since kind of V3. I think is the oldest one that I remember working with. Yeah, I don't think anyone really. Oh yeah, Pete's the other one. Yeah, it's done too. I really only seriously got into it around the V4 timeframe, but.
Because it sucked before then.
Well, yes, because it sucked before then, sure. And well, actually, I was going to say it still sucks now, but Shannon's in the room, so I probably shouldn't say that. But I've been doing software dev for over a decade now, and I've got a couple of core principles that I always try and stick to when I'm doing software projects, whether they're web projects or whatever it might be. And that's that you really want to make sure that you're doing something that supports team-based development. And that could be a team of 1 or it could be a team of 10. Everything for your code base or everything for your platform should be in source control. And this kind of goes to the idea of like the F5 experience. And I'll talk a bit more about these in depth in a moment. CI is a must. It doesn't matter if it builds on my machine, it's also got to build on everyone else's machines and kind of an independent third party's machine. So some kind of build infrastructure. And we also want to be able to deploy things as fast as possible. So continuous delivery is a big thing that I strive for in any projects that I work on. Because we want to be able to release as fast, as often, and as automated as possible. The most common deployment mistakes happen when there's a person involved, in my experience anyway. No, it's not me that's causing the problem because I'm not allowed to write software anymore.
You're building the tools.
I just release open source projects. I don't actually write software that provides people, or like build applications that provide people with value. Okay, so there's one major problem that you always hit when working with a content management system, and this can be anything from something like Umbraco from an open source perspective, all the way through to your big enterprise ones. And I've worked with some massive enterprise content management systems with probably the most complex one I had. They had an obfuscated database as well as the actual code being obfuscated. But they all come back to this one core problem that you have, which is the database. There's always stuff in the database that you want to take across multiple environments. And that can make a bunch of the stuff that I had on the previous slide really challenging. So that's like, it was always the pain point that you experience. So let's start talking about, what do I mean when, why can teams be a problem when doing a content management solution? So, well, we can do a shared database. So we have the dev server in the office and everyone's using that, and we all have that connection string and we have to make sure that we hit it. But that can introduce problems. What happens if I add something or I remove a dog type from the site, and not everyone else has got the latest code out of Git, and all of a sudden everything has just fallen over because they're trying to pull something that doesn't exist anymore. Okay, so we go to the idea of everyone has individual databases. Well, how do we make sure that everyone has the same connection string? I've actually set an SA password that's not password 1, or my instance isn't on dot. I've put it on some random instance. I remember this in the really early days of contributing to Umbraco when we were still using TFS on Codeplex, and we had like 15 web configs checked in for everyone's different machine that we would run on. And then like someone's machine would die, and then you wouldn't delete that web config that was in there, but you'd stand up a new machine and you'd have another one in there and stuff like that. But also like in a team environment, if you've got a shared database, so I've added a new property to a doc type, or I've created a new data type, or whatever it might be. How do I make sure that the 3 other people that are working on this project also get that, and they're able to work with it and stuff like that. Or who actually needs a team? You're working on your own. You're a sole proprietor, or you're working as an individual contractor into a site, into a company building websites. Well, still at the end of the day, you need to make sure that at some point in time, someone else can get that code and run with it. If my machine does die, and this happened to me 2 weeks ago, I had a problem with my laptop. I took it in, and they went, "Okay, here's a new one." Well, if I had anything on that machine, I need to be able to quickly get back up and running. So this kind of comes to the idea of the F5 experience. Kind of a Visual Studio analogy of being the F5 experience, where I want to be able to clone everything from source control and hit F5 and be up and running as fast as possible. But we all know what happens in application development. Well, first you've got to go speak to Charlie over there. He'll get you the database backup from production, then you're going to restore that onto your machine, and then you're going to be good to go. Well, actually, no, after you do that, you're going to have to clone the repo, so you've got the code, and then there's like 5 steps that, oh, wait, shit, we didn't actually document those. So I'll come sit with you, and we'll go through, and we'll make sure that we install these myriad of tools that you've got to have, and the database backup you've got is actually 2 weeks out of date. We did a deployment, so we're going to have to run a bunch of additional steps after the fact. I've been on every single one of those projects and just sat there going, okay, so realistically, I'm going to be effective in about 3 days' time. It's going to take me that long to just set up for this one bug fix that I've got to do, or this couple of weeks worth of work that I've got to do on this project. But it's going to take me days worth of effort. As someone that does consulting work, the more time that I have to spend setting up an environment is the less time I'm able to deliver value to that client. They're not paying me to sit around and work out how to install a whole bunch of tooling, or to speak to a bunch of different people because things aren't documented and things aren't clear from just what I pulled down. So this is ultimately the thing that you always end up with. You've cloned it out of Git, and it's just like, why won't you work? You're beating it from every angle. You've spoken to like the senior devs, and someone's just forgotten something. They didn't remember that you had to edit this particular column in a database, and this isn't just content management related, but that's something that constantly,
It becomes art.
Eventually it can become art. And also because I couldn't find a better animated GIF that expressed frustration, but out of that can come joy, and that's so I haven't even talked about what happens when you're trying to deploy this stuff. Shannon and I have got some great war stories of things that we did when trying to work out how to best deploy websites, things that involve seeding databases. Is it?
Yeah, it's on my site.
Oh wow.
I moved all the farm code ones.
Yeah, so
I'm pretty sure people still read it because we get support. So people are like, I tried this thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's definitely some nasty stories around how we tried like every way, shape, and form to do like ways to do automated deployment of Umbraco back in the day.
Right, this comes down to using Redgate.
Yeah. It came down to using Redgate, and things went very badly. So I guess that's kind of where Chauffeur grew out of. So I've got some fairly strong opinions. Anyone that knows me could probably attest to that, and I've not been shy about sharing them in the Umbraco community in the past. But it's all well and good to have opinions, but unless you're actually going to try and solve the problem that you're really pissed about, you're just an angry guy ranting. And I'm all cool with being the angry guy ranting for a period of time, but eventually you've got to actually try and step up and solve this problem, and that's sort of where Chauffeur grew out of. So Chauffeur kind of started as just an experiment of how I could work with the Umbraco API, and the name was a number of years ago. Everything that HQ would do always, like the name of the product always started with a C, and well, I suppose it's still true today, but products are not quite as prominent.
Yes, forms stuff.
Yeah, It used to be. It used to not be called Forms, but it's actually got a silent C. If you weren't aware, Pete, that's why it's. And I also started. The name was a bit of a joke on Courier because I have a massive hate relationship with Courier. I've used it on a lot of projects and used it in anger. So I thought, well, I can make a classier version of this, and I see a Chauffeur as a classier way of delivering things.
Old versions of Courier.
Yeah. No, apparently the new versions of Courier are better, but I haven't had to use it in anger yet because I have a better solution. So, what is Chauffeur? Essentially, it's a command line interface to Umbraco. That's what it started out as. Was I wanted a way to interact with the Umbraco API and without having to go through the web portal to do everything. With the work that was happening in V6 and then more prominently in V7 and where it's continued to go is that all of the core logic doesn't require you to be working in the browser. So I thought, well, let's see how far I can take this as an idea. And it was really, initially it was with me just poking around with what I could do with the APIs till I found some pointy edges and then work out, can I work around that? Do I need to, annoy Shannon because I was too lazy to submit a pull request and actually never get anywhere because he had better things to do than deal with esoteric problems that I had. It then has a bunch of inbuilt commands for things that you would commonly want to do with Umbraco that I have out of the box, and I'll walk through some of that stuff in a moment. And then ultimately, I didn't want to build something that only solved my problems because the things that I know how to solve and the things that I hit are not necessarily the same as how everyone needs to solve them or the same problems that everyone else hit. So I needed to make sure that extensibility was a key thing. Umbraco, being the community that it is, they love to be able to extend. So I needed to make sure that if I was building something that I wanted to try and encourage people to use, it also needed to be something that people could extend easily. So the easiest way to kind of do an analogy to what Chauffeur is it's entity framework migrations. Is the most common scenario that I try and target it for, but it's not the only thing that it can be used for. I know that there's some stuff built in now in Umbraco with the migration stuff that kind of tackles the same problem, but it's kind of, I have my approach to doing it. Out of the core, there's a way to do it, and it's pick whatever one works best in your particular scenarios. And I also haven't played around with the migrations enough to know where the overlaps are. So let's jump into a demo. So I have an application here. Do you guys want the font up or? Yeah, all good. Cool. I probably will have to turn up my terminal font because I forgot to do that already, and that might be a little bit smaller. But so I've got a web application here that I might be joining a team or someone else has already been working on, and I want to get it up and running. To save us from sitting here and watching NuGet download 30 packages or whatever it might be, and also save the bandwidth on my mobile, I've pre-installed a bunch of NuGet packages. But with Chauffeur, it is a matter of running. So Chauffeur is actually made up of two packages. There's the Chauffeur runner and Chauffeur itself. The Chauffeur runner is just the command line tool that bootstraps Chauffeur. Chauffeur as a DLL doesn't actually require to be, it can be run without the console application. And so if you're building extensibility on top of it, that's all you need. You don't actually need to extend a console application directly. It does some stuff indirectly, but I'll talk about extensibility in a little bit. So it's just a couple of NuGet packages to install. Again, it's obviously targeted people that are doing Umbraco development from Visual Studio. The idea of packaging and delivering it via NuGet, depending on Umbraco via NuGet and all that kind of stuff, I think works just fine. So, like I said, already got that installed. We have our lovely packages config, and then I've got the two packages up here, Chauffeur and Chauffeur Runner. So, like I said, the idea is that I've cloned this from the Git repo. So, someone's probably already done the Umbraco install on their machine. So, if we have a look inside of our web config, we'll see that there is a connection string. This is just using SQL CE because that's obviously the simplest way for me to get this up and running. But if you say using a local database, like local SQL server or whatever, you deal with those problems as they come up. Because it's already been installed and been pre-configured, so we've got like the Umbraco versions all in there and all that sort of stuff. So let's just compile this. All right, that's all done. And we will find out where this is on disk so I can navigate to it on the terminal. All right, and yeah, sorry, as I said, let's just font size this a little bit. Too much. Okay, so because I've depended on the runner, so I get a console application actually gets copied into the bin folder here. So that's what the chauffeur runner.exe is, and that's what we'll use to interact with chauffeur in this case. So the idea is that it would live inside the bin folder of your application. Now, when it comes to deployment, you're probably going to run this on an environment that's non-production and then target the production database rather than actually deploy an executable into your production web server. Just from a general server security perspective, you probably want to avoid having random executables deployed somewhere, but feel free to do that if that's the way that you want to do it. If you're running something inside of like Azure, then you've got other ways that you might need to deal with it, to deal with Azure websites or whatever it might be, and that's probably a side conversation or something a bit bigger than I'll cover inside of this bit of a presentation. And we'll just run the chauffeur runner. Executable startup, and what it's doing is that because it's running inside of the bin folder of Umbraco, is it actually loads all of those Umbraco DLLs into the app domain of the console application. So it's got access to all the Umbraco core assemblies, any Umbraco extensions that you've got. They're also loaded into the console application as well. You'll notice that it's picked up that this is running Umbraco 7.6.3, which if you jump back here, you'll see that's the one that's in the web config. Because what it's also done is it's detected where the web config is and gone, well, I'm going to use that web config as my config for the console application. So I understand things like the app settings that you've defined. I understand connection strings that you've got. So I know where your Umbraco database is, or at least where it should be. In this case, I don't have that database. At least I hope I don't. Let's go app data. I do, because I was playing around with it earlier. Didn't see that, so it's gone. So it knows where the Umbraco database should be because it knows where your data directory is and all that kind of stuff. So first thing I want to do is I want to get all the document types, property editors, data types, macros or templates, etc. I want all of that stuff, and I want the database so I can log in. I want to run the install command. All right, well, it's gone. I've detected that you've got a SQL CE database. Is that? No, it's just fuzzy because of where I'm sitting. It's not ideal, but it's still semi-readable. So it's gone, well, I can see that you've got a SQL CE database, connection string defined, but you don't actually have that database on disk. Do you want me to create it for you? Sure, go ahead and create that. So it's created the SQL CE database. It's then running the Umbraco install instructions. So it's setting up all the Umbraco database tables the same way as if you were running it through the web UI, clicking by putting in your credentials and then click next, and then it does all of that stuff for you. So it runs those same scripts. My goal here was not to rewrite the Umbraco core logic. It was just to leverage what the core logic does. And there we go. Database is good to go. So I could do something like...
Are you using the Microsoft command line media package for this?
No, I'm not using I'm actually not using any third-party libraries to do all this. I've actually written my own little command line parser and stuff like that. And we'll see how kind of that plugs in a little bit. But so I ran an install command, but how did I know that I could run an install command? Well, because I can run help, and here's all the commands that I'm able to run. So you'll see that there's a bunch of different commands inside of there. Some of them have got aliases. Help in and of itself is actually a command. So we'll see how this plugs into the plugin engine a little bit later on, but these are all things that are just provided out of the box. So I could do like help install, and it turns out that I haven't actually written any help documentation for the install command. Whoops. Help user. So I've a command in there for working with the users. So these are the back office users. So we have one, I can change the user's password. I can change the user name. By default, Umbraco creates you a user in the database. It will automatically create you a user account with the name admin. During the web-based install step, it will actually rename that user account. I actually don't know if it changes the username from admin, but it gives you an email address, and that's what you would then use to log in. It also obviously prompts you for a password. Does anyone know what the password is going to be to log in right now? Well, yeah, but you actually can't use it because it's plain text password, and it requires you to have a hash password. Yeah. And so this is why I created a change password command. So if I was to do user change password admin, and then we'll give it a super secret password. This is a new thing in Umbraco 7.6 that you have to have at least a 10-character password if you do a default install. I used to be able to get away with just using password. So we hit enter, and we go. User, so the admin user's password's been changed. Now,
Fun fact, if you want to reset the password, if you clear out the SQL connection string and the version in your web config, and then run the installer, but enter the same connection string, it will overwrite whatever password you put in there as long as it's default and clear text in that way.
right, okay, so we're learning how to hack Umbraco as well by just forcing the installer to rerun is a good way to hack the Umbraco security model. Excellent, good to know. Okay, cool. So we've changed that user's password, and now we're ready to log in. Oops, we'll come back to here. Just launch this up in the browser. Open that. Admin password. Sweet. So we've logged in. Now, all I've done though is I've created the database, so I actually don't have any document types at this point. Arrow is down, but I don't have anything in there. The point is that I'm in a team-based environment, so there's probably someone else that's created some document types. Yes, there are, and I have this file that sits inside that I've got sitting inside of my Visual Studio solution here, but it's sitting inside of the app data / Chauffeur folder. And this is a special folder that Chauffeur looks for stuff that you want to use inside of its commands. So if you're having a look, and the astute viewers will have noticed that this looks very much like an exported file from the Umbraco packager, or it could also be a file that you've right-click exported a document type directly from the back office. So this is just the standard Umbraco export XML. You could even have got this out of USync. So, well, I want to put those into my database because this is what my base structure looks like. So, a package, and then 001 base. So that's the name of the file that I've got there, 001 base. And I'm going to run the package command, or pkg, which is an alias for that same command. Execute that. So it's importing a template, it's importing some content types. And if we come back to the browser, oops, and reload, there we go. I've imported a whole bunch of content types that, there we go, they've all got properties against them, they've all got their property descriptions against them, they're wired up to the appropriate property editors, and all that kind of stuff. And there we go, now I'm ready to start building out the site using our base template. Now, obviously, I'm talking about this maybe in the scenario that I'm joining an existing team, but if I'm, say, working in an agency or a company that's doing a lot of Umbraco applications, I probably have a lot of stuff that I use as my starting point. So I could use this as my starting point inside of an Umbraco application and just go, okay, install my base template set, install my base document types, my base property editors, my base macros if I'm using macros or anything like that, up and running, and now I can add the extensions over the top of that. So I could do something like, let's say that I did add another one, call it foo because I'm super imaginative, and then we will hit save. Nope. And then we'll export that one. Cool, so that's UDT. As a current limitation, actually I can't remember if I fixed the limitation where you have to rename it from UDT to XML, but yeah.
Someone needs to fix that dialogue. Yeah, still on web form.
No, it's downloaded, it just hasn't dismissed itself. So someone feel free to submit a bug request or even a pull request. I'm sure Shannon would much more appreciate that. Let's say I've created this one, I've exported it, I then add it to source control, I send it up as a pull request. My colleagues, they review it, they accept it, gets into master, they pull it down to their machines, and then they can install that data type themselves onto their local running instances. We can then run the command to do that install of run package and then foo onto our build server as part of our build server, and then I install that document type there, so on and so forth. So quite easily able to do this to easily put everything in source control and then push that across multiple environments. But it's still a little bit manual. I needed to know that I need to run the install command, then I need to run change password, then after that I need to run the import command initially. So let's actually trash everything and start again. So we'll stop that process, get rid of all of that, we'll quit, bye-bye Chauffeur, and we'll delete that database there. Okay, so I want a way that I can easily run a series of commands and not have to remember to run them multiple times. This is where the idea of a delivery comes in. Because I think I'm a really funny guy, there's a whole bunch of just in-jokes inside of the Chauffeur code base and the things that Chauffeur exposes that are really funny to me, but that's probably not going to work for everyone, but because it's all about delivering stuff. So things are called deliveries. The interface is the extend is base class is deliverables. If you need to write help, it's I provide help is the interface you have to implement. Funny guy. I'm glad that everyone's laughing with me, not at me. Okay, so there's a command called delivery. And the idea of delivery is kind of akin to that EF migrations, that I might have a bunch of things that I need to execute, but I don't know which ones I need to execute, and I don't want to have to remember which ones or go over and tell the other people on my team, hey, can you make sure you execute this particular command? I just want something that they can execute that takes them from 0 to V1 of the site. And then similarly for a deployment, we want to deploy out, and I don't want to have to then manually log in and run this console application and go, import this, import this, import this, import this in a repetitive fashion. So I'm going to create a new file. Whoops, not here. I'm going to create a new file, and we'll call this a text file. New item, there it is. We go general text file, and then we'll call this 01 setup.delivery. So a delivery is essentially a set of steps that Chauffeur needs to execute. So we might do install, and install takes an argument of Y if you just want to ignore the prompt to install the database if it doesn't already exist. And we'll do user change password admin to password, and then we'll do package deploy one base. Okay, so we'll go up to Chauffeur runner, and then I can provide it with command line arguments of things that I want it to execute. So in this case, I'm just going to use the alias for delivery, so it's going to execute deliveries on startup. So assuming everything works correctly, we go. So it's found that the database doesn't, so first off it's tried to find a tracking table for what deliveries have previously been run, or delivered is the terminology that it actually uses. Well, it doesn't find any, or it even can't connect to that database. So it goes, well, most likely you haven't got that database there. So I'm going to assume that the first thing that you're going to run is an install command. If not, it's going to error anyway, and you're going to end up with a bailout situation. But in this case, it was. So you can see there that it's gone, well, I'm going to expect that you've got an install step. Well, it turns out the install was the first thing. So it's specified that a SQL CE database, it's created the database, prepared the Umbraco installation, it's changed the user's password, it's then imported some content types. It has set up the Chauffeur delivery database, and then track that one has been run. So if I was to execute this again, it will go and found that the setup one has already been run, so it's going to skip it. It hasn't found anything else that you want to do. So now, if we think about this in a continuous delivery scenario, I've checked in something here that represents the latest release that I'm going to do, or the latest bit of changes that I've got. And we've pushed that out through to production, and on production it's just gone and gone, well, I don't need to run the setup step because I've previously run that, so I'm just going to run 02. Or it uses order off disk, so that's kind of why I use the convention of like 001, 002, 00N, and that's how I would do it. But so if I was to, let's say, add another delivery, add a text file, we'll call this 002 stuff delivery, and let's just go ct get all. So this one's going to use a content type that I've got, content type command that I've got inside of there that just lists all the content types that I've got inside of the database. So here's the 4 content types that I've got in there. I have some formatting issues. That's the real challenge on a terminal to work out how best to format something. But see that those are the IDs in the database, the Umbraco, the aliases and their names, and then I could log into Chauffeur and then do like ct get 1061. So here's all the details about that particular document type. So here's the properties that are on that and stuff. So this is where it kind of shows some of its heritage as a command line to just inspect Umbraco. But that's the sort of stuff that you would progressively build up over time what your application does, the same way as you would have SQL database migration steps as they build up. So I said that the other key thing that I wanted to do is Chauffeur was to make sure that it was something that was easy to extend. So we'll just do a little bit of a touch on extensibility, and we'll start by adding a new class. And we'll call this demo deliverable, and this is going to extend deliverable. Okay, so this is a base class that Chauffeur provides, and that's how you create your extensions. It has a default, it has a constructor that you have to implement that takes 2 arguments, a text reader and a text writer. So this is an input stream and an output stream. Now, these are generally going to be bound to console in and console out so that you can read and write from the console. But if you're, say, a good developer that wants to write unit tests, you want to unit test how this would work. You don't want to be trying to work out how to parse the console during a unit test. You just want a text reader and a text writer. So that's why these are the abstractions that we pass in. Okay, so I need to then give Chauffeur some way that it knows how to discover this type that I'm creating and discover the name that you're going to use from the command line or wherever it might be. So this is the name, the deliverable name, sorry. We'll call this demo. And then if I wanted, I could set up a deliverable alias, DEM. Yeah, that was not really going to work very well. If you try and use the alias that someone else has already got, you're actually going to run into errors. I haven't got quite as good error checking if you try and register something multiple times. So I'll just give it another thing like this. And then I would, realistically, that's all I need to do. It's not going to do anything of use to me yet. So I need to actually I need to give it some logic. So to do that, I would override the base class's run method. So this is asynchronous. Everything in Chauffeur is intended to be asynchronous because we're working generally with I/O operations. So if you're reading from the command line, or if you're writing to a disk, or you're writing to a database, you want to do those asynchronously. You don't block threads and stuff like that. So everything will return a task. But let's just go wait. Oops, sorry, async. And then we'll return a deliverable response of continue. So is this class successful? So I've got a couple of different ways that you can respond. So continue, finished, but there was an error. So you can continue to decide whether or not you want to error out as the core application, and then shut down if you want to, if basically you've hit a fatal error and you cannot process any further, you can force it to shut down from your response here, but we're just going to leave it at continue. And then we'll do await out. So if I want to write to the output stream, I have a property called out, and then we'll go write line async hello from a demo. All right, we'll compile that. Make sure I quit Chauffeur before I did. Okay, so give that a compile. And let's start up Chauffeur. Run help as soon as it's up. And we'll see. I have one called unknown because I have potentially got an error or something. Well, that makes my demo really sucky, doesn't it? Oh wait, no. It has crashed out because of something somewhere. I'm just going to delete that. Oops. Come back here and build. Wait. It's a protected constructor. I need to make it a public constructor. So it's tried to create an instance, but it couldn't find the public constructor, and so it probably could do with a bit of error handling love. All right, let's go help. There we go. So we get a new one at the end called demo. If I type demo, hello from a demo. So it's that easy to add something that is specific for what you need. Like you don't need to then tell anything specific to Chauffeur. It's all done through the code. You just expose a public class with a public constructor with an attribute on it, which is the name that you want to invoke it via. If we wanted to add help, I would then implement the interface I provide directions. Because yeah, funny guy. And then again, made that async. Wait out dot. I can do stuff. Help demo. Okay, so you can. That's how you can add help documentation to what you're writing as well. So. Now, let's say that I wanted to get the list of, I wanted to do something with content types inside of my custom deliverable, the thing that I'm creating. Well, Chauffeur conveniently has an IOC container built into it, and it actually wires up a bunch of the Umbraco API for you, so you get straight access to it. So if I wanted to get access to the content type service, it's iContent type service. Shannon's nodding, so I'm going to hope that's right. Content type service. Content type service. Let's just put this into a local variable, or an instance member, sorry. Create a reader in the field. And then let's say down in here, I could get content type service dot get all content types, and then we'll just do await out dot write line async. Oops. There are plus cts dot count content types. Give it a sec to finish compiling. There are 4 content types in my database. So I haven't had to do a whole lot of stuff special to get access to the Umbraco API. It's there, it's available for me if I want to do it. All the services I wire up, the Umbraco database is available as just like the raw database. The application context is available. Basically anything that you could conceivably want to use outside of a web context is there available for you, that's automatically wired up. You can add your own stuff to the IOC container if you want. You just have to implement a base class. I think it's provides dependencies or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'd probably actually look in the code base. iRegistration builder and stuff like that, and then you provide dependencies that way. So if you had something like your own custom database that you're hooking into, then you could wire up your own database or your own application services, because you might want to run like some custom migrations against your own like application backend that's separate from Umbraco, and all that kind of stuff. You can quite easily plug that in your own custom deliverables and wire them up quite easily. So, pardon?
Or like forums or something.
Yeah, so if you wanted to work with Umbraco forms, yeah, I haven't done anything specific to work with forms. I'm mostly because when I started, that wasn't in the box. I don't think, but there's no reason why you couldn't do that, or you couldn't write your own stuff that ships as a NuGet package that someone else can install. So I have a couple of things that I won't do out of the box with Chauffeur. One of those is deal with content. I don't have any support in for doing content migration. So if you don't want to do that in general. It's a hard problem to solve, but it's also not really a release time problem.
That's why we always separate. We call it schema types and content types. But
Yeah.
not content types.
Yeah.
Content.
Yeah. And
It's a bad road to go down if you want to start supporting that.
Yeah.
Dependency graphs are ridiculous.
I've looked into what it would take if I wanted to build this, and the way I would do it is you essentially not use any of this plumbing. And some of the fundamental ideas that I'm going to hear, yeah, I think that they work, but generally speaking, no, it's not the same. I do actually have a NuGet package for Chauffeur that does basic content migrations, and it's intended for things like if you've got a bunch of base content types like metadata and stuff like that, you might set up. It was intended to work in conjunction with like a starter kit. So a starter kit where it will install the document types and all that kind of stuff out of the box. But how do you get that base content so that you've got the website when you hit F5? It doesn't just say, hey, log into Umbraco and build content. You could do all that, but it's still limited by the Umbraco packaging engine for that one, because that's really the simplest way to do content imports. But that's not designed for large scale content importing.
A question then, how do you deal with, okay, so you've spun up your environment, right?
Yep.
As a developer, so now I've got to spend like the next day or 2 days setting up all the content so you can actually work against them.
So yeah, it's a good point. Like, how do you get content into this if I'm starting from scratch? And that really comes down to what kind of content you need to consider the application functional. So this is why I did build an extension, but I don't have it in the box that will import content via the Umbraco content, the Umbraco packaging API. So you can do that, but it would be a separate step. The reason that I've done that, I have some fairly strong opinions, as you know, Pete. It's because the way that everyone wants to set up content for their initial site is going to be different. And I just don't believe that you can make a generic enough framework that allows people to be able to set up content easily across a variety of different ways. So what I would recommend to someone like yourself who runs a company that focuses on doing Umbraco development, you would have a way that you would structure your content out of the box, and you'd probably just have a deliverable that you have on your own internal NuGet server or like whatever it might be that you would import that then does your content pull. Does it pull that out of a database backup somewhere, or does that, and you would have that as a delivery step. So like you 001 set up imports content types and then does whatever it is to set up your base documents to work with, your lorem ipsums and whatnot.
Like I guess what I'm sort of getting at is that generally what we will be receiving most of the time is somebody's broken Umbraco build, right? That we have to then go and repair, replace, or fix.
Yeah.
I'm just sort of looking at this and going, okay, well, I'm almost thinking that you've got to get to a certain point and then you cut off and say that that is the current database build that you can then get Chauffeur to as one of your deployment steps, as actually that is the baseline at which this particular sprint they're running on, up until the next deployment, and then that becomes the baseline again, as opposed to like everyone spinning up from scratch every time.
Yeah. So the question for the recording was more around how do you deal with maintenance schedules and owning a site long term. There's a lot of ways to do that, and I don't want to have to force people to work in a particular way. So yeah, if it is a case that you essentially put stage gaps inside of it. So this is how you get to a particular version. Then this is where you restore the database from, and then go forward. Then that's one option. Another option, like I said, is that you could use something that is a lot more intelligent about how you would import content from a file like this.
We still see a lot of like benefit from sharing a database on, say, Azure for all of our devs. I mean, we don't have internal servers and infrastructure that way. We do all of our stuff out on Azure for the one reason that, you know, we do have a single source of truth for the devs. The problem we see is actually from deploying out of our environments into the production environment.
Yep.
So can you still use it with a shared database that's sitting out on Azure as opposed to sitting? I mean, I understand your opinion about it.
Yeah. Look, you can definitely work with it in a shared database in scenario. Essentially, what you do is you're removing Chauffeur from dealing with with the developer side of experience and turning it into just a build and deploy tool.
Yeah, I mean, we never deploy content as such, other than maybe settings. You know, that someone's put into the system, but it's more along the lines of we just want to deploy configuration. So I'm just sort of wondering, you know, like if you've got a shared environment that the devs are working in, and we're using Chauffeur more for, like, say, CI and continuous delivery, like using something like.
Yeah, and that's really where your idea of your delivery steps come in. So you together as a team, you're working on it, and it's like, okay, cool, end of sprint. Well, that's where we put a delivery step in, and that is, you know, take the document types as they sit at a particular at that point in time. You know, we've exported them via packaging engine or Chauffeur. I think I can't remember if I finished off the stuff, but I started building a way to export document types and things like that. You check those into source control. You push that release or however it might be to then
compatible with USync.
So it is compatible with USync because USync actually uses the Umbraco import-export engine to do most of its stuff. There's a couple of things that it supports that don't have support during packaging. I think languages might have been one of them. Oh no, that might have changed. There was a couple of things I remember that they didn't support that USync had written custom. I did, like early on, I was talking to the guys that wrote USync about how could we better align, because one of the things that I disagree with their approach is that I want to do this as a build step or as a release step. I don't want to do this as the first time the application launches, which is how USync works. I don't want my first user to take that performance hit. I want this to be done as a release. But that's just a difference of opinion between how we work. There's no reason why you couldn't use USync to kind of export all the stuff and then make sure that gets into the folder that Chauffeur's aware of. And then as Chauffeur runs, it just pulls in all that kind of stuff. Hell, you could even run a deliverable that pulls in the USync APIs and actually just pushes it back by them. Or even just bootstraps USync and calls the USync API itself.
I just disable everything USync and then use your command line to run it all.
Yeah.
I don't know development stuff. But,
So you actually use Chauffeur? I interrupt you about that.
Yeah. And I just use USync. So if I pull down a new version, I just run the command line. I've got my content, I've got my pipes and everything set up as it was when I last checked it in. And I just set up USync as it only exports on the fly.
Yeah, cool.
Everything keeps up to date.
I'm more than happy to have probably an offline conversation with you, Pete, about what would be the best way to do it
I'm just interested from a team, like from the perspective of we have a distributed team across multiple locations, but we really do deal with a lot of our client content is in our environment.
Yeah, I'm definitely open to working out the best way to make that work for people. Most of the case studies that I've got about how to make it work are stuff that I've worked on. So I've got a fairly small sample size. And the only way that I can change my opinion or change the way something works is to work with the community, work out what's missing, what would be the best way to go about something and do it. Because if you follow along with the development process, it's very much in spits and spurts, because it's whenever I've got a problem specific to solve, I'll go in there and deal with it. Or if someone raises a particular bug or asks for a particular feature, I'll look at time to dedicate to build that and stuff like that. Yeah. Anyway, given that Peter's here, we'll wrap up and the formalities at least of this, and happy to continue conversations afterwards. But thanks everyone.